Hi, can you guys hear me? Good, good, good. Let's get started. Yes, get started. We're going to talk today about International Fuel Tax Agreement. The International Fuel Tax Agreement. I hope you guys are getting it in like we're getting it in, and the overflow is coming, and it's coming and keeping you guys busy. We're just going to get started here and dig into how to file these IFTA tax returns for our clients. Remember earlier we said that this is part of what we offer as an additional services here, the Truckers Bookkeeper, and we enjoy doing this. As at the end of the day, we're accountants, right? We're bookkeepers, and so this is dealing with the numbers, and we're always interested into getting into the bottom of this type of work, right? So let's pull up here. There it is. There's the show I was looking for. So let's get started here. And the subject is how to file your IFTA quarterly tax returns or the International Food Tax Agreement quarter returns that's due every single quarter. You have to file them no matter what the situation is. These things need to happen. And what you're doing is you're assigning as an agreement. So in other words, if it's not an agreement, if the taxpayer, the IFTA taxpayer is not a member of the International Fuel Tax Agreement, if they're not a member, then chances are they're paying the trip permits, right? Chances are they're paying for the trip permits. Okay, if they're not paying for the trip permits, then chances are they are in an agreement. They have entered into the agreement, which is the International Fuel Tax Agreement. That's exactly what it is, guys. It's an agreement that's made between the 48 states of the United States and 10 provinces of Canada. So there are states that actually participate in IFTA, and there are states that do not participate in IFTA. Okay, so how do we file the IFTA quarter returns? We're going to start with clicking on first the Comptroller's Office. This is specific to the state of Texas, guys. This is specifically to the state of Texas. How do we file the IFTA tax returns for the state of Texas? So you're going to go over to the Comptroller's Office. You're going to, not the Comptroller's Office, the website. And on the website, you're going to click in www.comptrollertexas.gov. And you're going to be looking for the web file. Okay, the web file is where you're actually going to file the tax returns electronically. Okay, otherwise you're going to do it paper form, right? You're going to do a paper form, but we're not doing it paper form. We're going to do it electronically. I'll show you. We'll go through briefly on how those returns are filed in the paper form, but that's not how we're doing it, right? We're actually going to do it through, oh, sorry guys. We're actually going to do it through the electronic version. And then after we do the electronic version, after we do the login to the web file, what you're going to do is, and this is assuming that you've already set up the process, right? You're going to enter in the username and the password, and then you're going to click on the assign tax, because there's multiple taxes that you can pay inside this web file, right? So real quickly here, I'm going to try to drag over. Come on. Okay, so here, this is what I was saying earlier. Your first step, you're going to basically log into the Comptroller's Office, and this is it right here, the comptrollerstexas.gov. You're going to click here, or Google search here, type that in your address, and what that's going to bring over is the Comptroller's Office. It's going to bring over the web file, and guys, this is what you're looking at right here, web file. If you haven't already set this up, set it up. This is the only way you're going to be, if you're planning to file quarter returns electronically, this is the way it's done through the web file, okay? So the web file is useful and it's going to get you exactly where you need to go. All right. So let me scoot that back over here. And again, guys, we're talking about the International Fuel Tax Agreement, and we're going to file these IFTA tax returns right now. We're going to go through the entire process. And once I find here it is, I think this is it. I'm trying to sit here and find my screen so we can go to the next screen. And it has disappeared on me. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Okay, so again, we're talking about the International Fuel Tax Agreement, and it is definitely a agreement, okay, that you should register for, you should file for. And there's a IFTA application that you have to complete, your client has to complete in order to be able to be licensed and get those credentials in. And once you get those credentials in, you have a license. At that point, you're obligated to file these tax returns. I don't care if there's no operations. You have to file that there are no operations. So if the truck is down, if the truck is in a shop, if there's a new truck, a new purchase truck, or whatever the case may be, if you have a IFTA license, which means you have a IFTA account, you have to file the IFTA tax returns, whether it's in operations or not. Okay. All right. So let's move over to the next screen. I found it, guys. I found it. So what you're going to do is the next screen is going to ask you if you're filing the original return, which is what it's the current return that you're going to be filing for the quarter, right? So this is 2021, whatever year you're in. You're going to be looking for first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, or fourth quarter. So the original return is always the quarter that you're filing for. If you're doing an amended return, you'll select the file amended. If you're making a payment only, if you're just looking at the summary, if you're just looking at the transaction history, you'll click those buttons. And so what we click is the file original return. The original return here, original return, here is where you would click here, and that will bring you to the current period, right? And so the current period is going to be March 31, 2021, right? And so the due date is always, the due date for IFTA is always a month behind the period end date. So IFTA, the International Fuel Tax Agreement, IFTA is an agreement that's made between 48 states, the 48 states of the United States. It's an agreement, right? And so once you elect to be a member of the IFTA, you have decided that, you know what, we're not going to purchase the fuel permits any longer. We're not purchasing the trip permits any longer because we're now a part of the IFTA agreement. And with the IFTA agreement, you have to play by its rules, right? And so those rules say that you have to file quarter returns. Each return ends at the end of each quarter. So you have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So those are the 4 quarters in the year. But the due date for these things, and guys, you don't have, if you don't need to wait to the end of the deadline, to the very crunch, when it's actually due, don't. And I know some of you guys are probably just overwhelmed and bombarded, and you're working weekends trying to get caught up on everything. But as soon as you can and are able to file those returns, it has to be before this due date here, right? It has to be before April 30th or 30 days behind the prior period ending date. Okay. So the next screen is going to bring you to the type of fuel, right? The type of fuel. So you have to select all fuel types for this particular report. So I had a client ask me once, they were like, well, my truck is going to be CNG, which is compressed natural gas. I don't have to file IFTA, do I? Well, you most certainly do, because it's part of the fuel agreement, it's part of the requirement. And so if you're running any of these guys right here, you have to elect in. And remember I mentioned earlier, if the truck is down or something's going on, maybe the driver is down, maybe the driver is sick, I don't know. Whatever the situation may be, no operations. This is what you have to go here and do it anyway. You have to go into web file. Remember earlier we went to, let's go back. So earlier we went to the comptroller's texas.gov, right? Remember that? And then we clicked on the, we clicked on here to where you're looking for the web file. Once you get to this website, you're looking for the web file. You're gonna click here, and then that's gonna bring up a whole bunch of good things, mainly your username and password and all that stuff that you need to actually get into the system to file the return. Okay, and so that's where we're at. And then you click the type of tax that's assigned. All right, so let's go back. Where were we? Okay, so we were selecting the type of fuel. So once you've selected a type of fuel, and again, if there's no operation, this is where you would click no operation. But in this situation, there is operation, and so you're gonna select a type of fuel and click continue. I hope this, guys, let's just pause for 1 second. I hope this is helping you. I really am impressed with you taking this next step, this extra step to learn something to help you better your business. And we're here to deliver useful information for you, for your business. And so I really appreciate you for coming on and staying tuned and focused enough to get through this. Okay, and so the next screen, once you click this continue button, it's going to take you to this next screen. And this screen is going to ask you for the total IFTA miles. So guys, before you even started, right, you've done your homework, you've collected the documents that has this information on it, because if there's ever going to be an audit, you want to make sure you can support your numbers. And so here you're going to click in the total IFTA miles, right? And this is a rounded number. Don't put in any decimal 0.5678. No, this is a whole number. So it says whole miles. You're going to put whole miles. That means no decimal, nothing after the decimal, right? Whole numbers. Here you're going to type in the total non-IFTA miles. So remember I talked about earlier, there are some states that are not participants, yet they still have their own rules and regulations as well. They still have their own reporting requirements. Okay, but there are some states that are not considered IFTA regulated, or IFTA states, or IFTA members. In that case, this is the you would actually type in here the number of miles driven in the non-IFTA areas. And then here, this is your total gallons purchased, right? So on the actual receipts, right, if they don't have a system, and really what you're getting this information out of the ELD, the electronic logging device. If they do not have a system, then they have some system going on where they're tracking the mileage as well as the gallons purchased. However, when they purchase that diesel or whatever their fuel type is, when they purchase that, they're on the receipt, right? On the receipt, you're going to have number of gallons, like the actual number of gallons purchased. And so that's what you would put here. So this is the total for all states traveled in that quarter. This is the total for all non-IFTA miles traveled in that quarter. And this is, whoa, what just happened here? Don't get ahead of me. And this is the total for all miles traveled in that quarter, right? So total, all in whole numbers, no decimals. Here, you're going to go down here, you're going to select the jurisdictions, right? And you guys, the jurisdiction is going to be the states, right, that their trip report has recorded as the number, the actual states that they traveled, the actual states that they worked for that quarter. And then here, so I have, this is just an example, I have Alabama, Arkansas, and so forth. And so for each of those states, you will select the number of miles, the taxable miles, which are the same, right? Because all of these states are going to be taxable miles. All of these states are going to be taxable miles, right? All of them are going to be taxable miles. And then here is the number of gallons that's purchased. So it's kind of cut off, but that it says the same thing here. So purchase gallons. So remember, this column is this column and this column is identical. They will be identical. So whatever you put here, you put here. Whatever you put in Arkansas, you put here. Whatever you put in Arizona, you put here. Whatever you put in California, and so forth, right? Except when you get to the surcharges, there are certain states, Indiana, Kentucky, and Virginia, who actually have surcharges. Well, it's going to be a surcharge, right? So you're gonna have an extra line, and you're gonna have zero. That's gonna be zero. It's always gonna be zero. However, the taxable miles remain, right? Like you're gonna be taxed. That's the whole purpose. You're gonna be taxed for the miles. This column is stating the total IFTA miles, period, right? So if you duplicate the surcharge here, then you will be duplicating the number of mileage here. So when you get to the surcharge, where let's say it says Indiana surcharge, and you actually had miles, so you'll have two lines, right? Let's just pretend that this Texas says Indiana, right? So in the Indiana one, you'll put, let's say 200 miles here, 200 taxable miles here. Same difference. This number doesn't change. Well, Indiana has a surcharge. So on that second line, it'll be Indiana surcharge. The total, if the miles will be zero, but your taxable miles, because they are taxable miles, will not change. So this number, this column here doesn't affect, it's not the total number of IFTA miles. These are the total taxable miles. Okay. All right. I hope that got through. All right. And so this is kind of, this is a summary. And again, this is an example, but this is a summary of the information I put in. These are all dummy numbers. I put in the number of miles traveled. For instance, total miles and the taxable miles are the same, as I said before, unless there's a surcharge. And again, you will zero out the surcharge, right? And again, those three states are Indiana, Kentucky, and Virginia are going to have surcharges. And before I go any further, let's say this: it doesn't matter. Let's go back. It doesn't matter the number of trucks in a fleet. You have one IFTA license for all of those trucks, and you have 1 quarter return. So if you have 10 trucks, you're going to put whatever, if 10 trucks travel in the state of Alabama, 100 miles, then you're going to put 100 miles times 10 in this number right here. If those same 10 trucks traveled in the state of Arkansas 2 miles, then you're going to put 10 times 2 miles that's traveled. So what I'm saying is that you don't have a separate return for each truck. All of what the fleet of what the trucks traveled, depending on the state, are going to be in this one return. So add them up and put them in. Add all the trucks up. Make sure you have all of the states that were traveled and put it in. All right. And sometimes in some cases, like in this case, in that situation where there is a tax due, what you would do is just pay the tax, right? Have your client pay the tax owed. And in some cases, like for us, we have a credit card authorization form, and so we'll have that on file for times like this, and we just run the card, right? An authorization form, so that we're authorized to run the credit card to make the payment information. Just for kicks, guys, I want to show you how the actual paper form works. Let me see if I could drag it over here. See if we can drag. Come on. Here we go. go. Okay. There we go. Okay, so the 56-102 form, that's the form that we're going to use if, right, stay with me, if you were filing a paper tax return. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to just digest what that looks like. If you notice, it's very, very, very similar to the form that we just completed electronically, right, on the web file. It looks very identical, right? So here, the taxpayer ID number, Texas taxpayer number, scratch that. That's not the tax ID. That's not the EIN number. That is not the EIN number. It has the EIN number within it. It is not the EIN number. Texas taxpayer number. So you'll have to get that number from the client or from the Texas Comptroller's office. Okay, the Texas taxpayer number will go here. The IFTA tax number will go here. The taxpayer name will go here. This is going to be a drop down. You indicate the filing period here. And this, again, guys, this is for if you are filling out if you're filing the quarter return by paper, by hand. Okay, that's what you're going to use. So again, we're talking about the International Fuel Tax Agreement, which is a tax, right, collection agreement between the 48 states, right? And this is the paper form. It is designed to reduce the administrative burden of reporting motor fuel taxes in multiple jurisdictions, right? And this is the quarter returns. And I'm just pausing real quick just to give a brief summary of the IFTA. It's pretty cool. It really is. It's kind of fun. It's not complicated at all. It's just making sure you're putting in the right information in the various slots, right? So basically, what the IFTA is, International Fuel Tax Agreement, is it's an agreement. It truly is a tax agreement. And so for those motor carriers who are purchasing fuel trip permits, you know what, for those who are purchasing the trip fuel permits, if they're entering into the state of Texas I think it's more than 10 times within one calendar year, the state of Texas requires you to get an IFTA license, right, in your base jurisdiction, in your base state. So you can't, so if you're traveling, if you're frequently crossing state lines into a particular state, you know, you're required to have IFTA. Otherwise, you can purchase the fuel trip permits. Okay, so a motor carrier that enters Texas with a qualified motor vehicle, more than 5 times in a calendar year can buy a fuel trip permit for each entry. But if you're going over that, then I mean, you might as well, like I said, you might as well go ahead and obtain a IFTA license. And again, like I said, that's a requirement of Texas, actually. So if you're entering in more than 5 times, you're obligated to obtain an IFTA license. Okay, but anywho, I digress. So this is where you would put the taxpayer name, and you would indicate the filing period on the drop down here. And of course, the due date, we talked about that, right? It's usually 30 days after the period end date. You're going to select the fuel. And again, we've already done this electronically, but we're just going over just to see what the paper version looked like. Okay, so you're going to select the type of fuel, and usually in most cases it's going to be diesel. In some cases it's going to be CNG. We have one scenario with CNG. In some cases, gasoline. And so whatever that case may be, let the driver, the motor carrier actually inform you what the fuel type is. Don't just assume. And again, remember we talked about completing or inputting the total number of miles of IFTA miles. That's the same thing. Remember, you're selecting here putting your cursor here, you're putting in the total IFTA miles. Here you're putting in the total non-IFTA miles. We talked about that, right? The non-IFTA miles. And then here you're going to put in, this is a total of A and B. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. You'll put this 2 here. And then what you're going to do is put in the total gallons purchased, right? And so what they're really trying to see is, what is the average fleet miles per gallon, right? What is that rate? And that's going to be whatever your total miles are divided by the number of gallons, the total number of gallons. And again, this is for all of your trucks, right? One if the license, you can have you have one and however many trucks you have, you're going to file one IFTA quarter return, okay, for all of those trucks. You're going to add them all together and put them in there. Okay, and then so here's the rate right here, calculate the rate. And again, you're going to type in the different codes, right? And these are your states, these are your jurisdictions. And if you scroll down here a bit, these are your jurisdictions abbreviations. So you can't make up your own states, guys. You got to use the abbreviations here. All right, put in your abbreviations, your total miles, taxable miles. Remember, we said these are the same. You remember that we were talking about the surcharges. How if you were in any one of those states, Indiana, Kentucky, or Virginia, and they had a surcharge, well, you wouldn't duplicate or repeat the number of IFTA miles, right? Because then you will be overstating your IFTA miles. But they're all taxable. They're all taxable. So in the example I gave you earlier, if you had a state of Virginia and your surcharge is here, surcharge if the miles would be 0, and then your taxable miles would be exactly what these numbers won't change, right? These numbers will be the same. All right, then you're gonna put in your taxable gallons, which is I divided by E. Remember that rate over here? That rate was the total miles divided by the number of gallons, and that's how you kind of got in, you got, okay, about how much the fleet is doing miles per gallon here. So the same thing, you're doing the calculation. Again, this is why people kind of go, go towards the electronic version, because it's not a big deal. It's just whatever you have time for. So I prefer the electronic version because, I mean, it's just easier to avoid the calculation and to avoid any errors. And so that's why I do it. So here we go. Purchase gallons, put purchase gallons here. The next net taxable gallons, the tax rate. You got to know the tax rate. There's an actual tax rate chart out there. And either at the end of the day, you're going to either owe or they're going to owe you. You're going to net out to 0. All right. So if you owe, then you pay them. If you have a credit, you can choose to apply to your next quarter, or you can choose to be refunded. Wait on that. And then if there's any interest due, and then your total due. And so this is, again, this is form 56-102, but watch this, guys. Once you're done with that version, you're going to come over here, and all of the stuff that you put into 56102, you're going to put into 56101, right? And so again, you put in the Texas taxpayer number, you put in the address and everything like that. And then here, if there's no operations, remember we talked about that, it doesn't matter if the truck is down. If you have if the license, if your account is active, you have to file regardless. If there's no operation, you still have to file, and that's where you'll click here. Here's where you will cancel the license, or if there's an address change, you'll make that amendment here. And again, it depends on what you're running with. Is it diesel? Is it gasoline? What is it? So you'll put those totals that you did on the previous form, 56102, you'll put those totals here. Right? You see where I'm going with this, guys? So it's just easier. It's not hard, it's not, I mean, we're looking at it, it's not difficult, right? But you would transfer all that information, put it over here, the totals due. As the authorized agent, you will sign here and print phone number and date, and then you have your taxpayer names right there. And guys, that's it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. That's it. And again, this is where you will add value to your clients by offering this service to them And everybody's happy, because truth of the matter is they really don't want to deal with the paperwork. They don't want to deal with the paperwork, and that's why we're here. So again, this is the International Fuel Tax Agreement for the state of Texas, and this is the state of Texas alone. I hope you guys really enjoyed this, and please feel free to leave any type of feedback, and that just makes us better. Thank you.